The stars were fading like embers in the blackness of space as the ship, a silver bullet of humanity's best engineering, hurtled towards the coordinates of the unknown planet. Captain Jameson's eyes were fixed on the view screen, his mind racing with the possibilities. The ship's computer, an androgynous voice that had become a constant companion to the crew, interrupted the silence. "Captain, we are entering the planet's atmosphere. Beginning descent protocols." Jameson's grip on the armrests tightened, his knuckles white as the ship shuddered and groaned around him. This was it, the moment of truth. The scans had hinted at wonders, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality that was about to unfold. The viewport flared bright as the ship pierced the veil of clouds, revealing a landscape that defied explanation. Towering crystalline spires pierced the sky, their facets glinting like a billion tiny diamonds. The terrain itself seemed to writhe and twist, as if the very earth was alive and in agony. "Captain, I'm reading anomalous energy signatures," the computer warned, its tone laced with a hint of concern. "Recommendation: alter course to avoid." But Jameson was already committed, his heart racing with excitement. "Take us in, pilot. We need to see this up close." The ship lurched, protesting the gravity of the planet's will, but Jameson's determination proved stronger. The engines roared, and the ship plunged deeper into the heart of the mystery. As they descended, the crystalline spires loomed larger, their facets flashing like a kaleidoscope of colors. The ship's instruments began to falter, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the energy emanating from the planet's surface. "Captain, I'm losing sensor resolution," the computer warned, its voice strained. "Warning: gravitational forces exceeding safety parameters." Jameson's eyes were fixed on the main view screen, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before him. The ship shuddered, protesting the incredible forces at play. Alarms blared, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning wiring. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing the crew off balance. Jameson's head snapped back, his vision blurring as the ship's gravity compensators struggled to cope with the turbulent forces. "What's happening?" he yelled, clinging to the armrests for dear life. "Pilot, respond," he barked. But the pilot's console was dark, the usually impassive face of the pilot now contorted in a mixture of fear and concentration. The ship careened wildly, throwing the crew about like rag dolls. Jameson's stomach dropped as the main view screen flickered, on the verge of collapse. The last thing he saw was a swirling vortex of colors, like a mad artist's palette, before the screen went dark. In the sudden silence, Jameson's voice was barely above a whisper. "Report." But the only response was the ominous hum of the ship's systems, faltering under the unrelenting assault of the alien planet's power. The silence was oppressive, heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Jameson's crew exchanged fearful glances, their faces illuminated only by the faint emergency lights. The ship's systems were failing, and with them the fragile thread of human control. Suddenly, the pilot's console flickered back to life, casting an eerie glow over the bridge. The pilot's face was deathly pale, their eyes sunken with exhaustion. "Captain, I've regained partial control," they whispered, their voice laced with desperation. "But we're caught in some kind of energy vortex. I'm trying to compensate, but it's like nothing I've ever seen." Jameson's grip on the armrests tightened, his mind racing to comprehend the situation. "Get us out of here, pilot. Now." The ship's engines roared back to life, protesting the strain as the pilot coaxed them to maximum power. The bridge lurched again, throwing the crew off balance. Alarms blared, and the air was heavy with the acrid smell of burning circuits. The view screen flickered, casting an eerie, pulsing glow over the bridge. The vortex filled the screen, its colors churning like a mad whirlpool. Jameson felt his stomach drop as the ship was pulled inexorably towards the heart of the maelstrom. "We're not going to make it," the pilot whispered, their voice barely audible over the din of the ship's protesting systems. Jameson's eyes locked onto the view screen, his mind numb with horror. The vortex was drawing them in, its power mesmerizing, irresistible. The ship, his crew, his entire world, was being pulled into the abyss. And then, in an instant, everything went black. The darkness was absolute, a void that swallowed all sound, all sensation. Jameson's mind reeled, his consciousness struggling to comprehend the impossibility of their situation. When the lights flickered back to life, the bridge was deathly still. The crew's faces were ashen, their eyes sunken with shock. The view screen, once a window to the unknown, was dark, a blind eye staring back at them. Jameson's voice was a croak, his throat parched. "Report." The pilot's response was barely above a whisper. We're not moving, Captain. The ship systems are offline. I think we're..." The sentence trailed off unfinished. The bridge was silent, the only sound the heavy breathing of the crew. Jameson's gaze roved the bridge, searching for answers. But there were none. They were trapped, suspended in a state of limbo, prisoners of the alien planet's power. A faint hum began to build, a gentle vibration that resonated through the ship's hull. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The hum grew, swelling to a crescendo that shook the very foundations of the ship. The view screen flickered, casting a sickly, pulsing glow over the bridge. An image began to take shape, a twisted, nightmarish landscape that defied comprehension. Jameson's eyes locked onto the screen, his mind reeling with horror. They were not alone on this planet. Something was coming for them, something born from the very fabric of the alien world. The hum reached a deafening pitch, and the image on the view screen coalesced into a monstrous, twisted shape, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly intelligence. The creature's gaze seemed to bore into Jameson's very soul, its eyes burning with an unblinking intensity. The bridge was frozen in terror, the crew's screams drowned out by the cacophony of alarms and the hum of the ship's systems. The creature began to move, its twisted body gliding towards the ship with an unnatural, jerky motion. Jameson's mind struggled to comprehend the horror unfolding before him, his thoughts paralyzed by fear. The creature's eyes flashed, and the ship's systems began to malfunction, sparks erupting from the consoles as the ship's very fabric seemed to unravel. The air was heavy with the stench of ozone and burning plastic. The pilot's console burst into flames, throwing the bridge into chaos. The crew scrambled to escape, but it was too late. The creature's influence had already compromised the ship's integrity. Jameson's vision began to blur, his consciousness fragmenting under the onslaught of fear and confusion. He was dimly aware of the crew's screams, the sounds of panic and despair as they succumbed to the creature's power. The last thing he saw was the creature's twisted face, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fury as it reached out to claim them all. And then, everything went black. When Jameson's eyes flickered open, he was alone. The bridge was dark, the only sound the heavy silence of death. The view screen was dark, the ship's systems cold and still. Jameson struggled to his feet, his body trembling with fear. The creature was gone, but its influence lingered, a palpable presence that seemed to haunt the very air itself. He stumbled towards the pilot's console, his heart heavy with grief. The ship was dead, his crew slaughtered. He was the only survivor, left to face the horrors that lurked on this forsaken planet. And then he saw it, a message scrawled across the view screen in angry, crimson letters. "You should not have come here."